the contract goes through one more full year. So we'll be up for renegotiation again, but we're in line with those state expectations.
Thank you.
Just wanted to add real quick too, that in addition to the tuition that off island families pay, they pay their own transportation for their student. So the district doesn't cover the transportation costs. Those are paid by the family.
Yeah, it's excellent. Well done.
Yeah.
Is what we pay our teachers and you a livable wage? Is that been benchmarked? And if we're not at a reasonable livable wage, can we get there from here?
Well, yes, I won't touch the livable wage part of it, but we did, when we did the teacher's contract, we do look at all of our kind of district comparisons, right? And where we sit in relationship to those. So that's something every year, or not every year, every 3 years when we kind of look at the teacher's contract, because the teacher's contract's 3 years, we check how we are doing against kind of our comps around, in the area. So, so that is kind of the measure we use generally, right? I would say, and same, I think for myself. Yeah.
I know that when we did the teacher contract 2 years ago, there was a significant increase, and I know when Aaron came on 2 years ago, there was a substantial increase from our previous superintendent as well. So I think we're in line.
The students who come from the mainland, what towns are they from?
Yeah, it's expanded a little bit. The bulk of them are from Cumberland. We have a kind of a little Cumberland crew and a North Yarmouth crew. So MS 8051 students, generally speaking. And that began because it was part of word of mouth. We have not done a lot of big recruitment as we don't have many seats. So they're primarily from there. We have actually a student from South Portland this year. So it's starting as well, and we've had inquiries from a few other communities.
That's a question. So when you first started that program, which by the way is an incredible and great idea, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, was that some of the families whose kids wound up coming here had relationships with the teachers that we currently have here. Have there been other kids coming that weren't part of that original cohort of known students?
Yes. Yep. Yes. Yeah. It started to kind of expand. There was a few, and in the ways that word of mouth starts to travel from sidelines to other preschool kind of relationships. So you're doing this, and so now, this year it's expanded, come out of that immediate circle.
Great. You may have covered it before, but the transportation costs associated with staff that work at the school, how would that pay?
Yeah, the school department covered, the school department, just to kind of do the contrast of what Jeff said, for the tuition students, they pay, right, for them. The mainlanders coming over here pay for their own tuition, but staff and the Yarmouth, the Shabig students that go to Yarmouth, the school pays for, the town pays for staff travel, and kind of middle and high school students going to Yarmouth.
And we have a contract with CTC that's every 2 years. What is that about?
Blanking.
Yeah, I think
Usually the vendors.
Right, yeah, I think next year we'll kind of relook at the CTC contract, and I guess it's actually then 2 years is when we'll do the teacher's contract again.
Given that the tuition for off-island students is very reasonable and low compared to other comparable schools, do you anticipate any increase in that?
I mean, we'll continue to look at it annually. I think, there aren't many like comparable to us, like comps, right? I mean, I think as long, we've continued, one of the kind of guiding principles that, we've talked about, have held around this is continuing to kind of build within our existing capacity. So the enrollment of this number of students, and even if it was at 11, hasn't necessitated, it's only some fringe costs around food and an extra workbook or those kinds of things. It hasn't required staffing increases and other substantial increases. And that was part of, and Elizabeth and the school committee should take credit for the idea and the initial conception. I came on board after the idea came to be. But was to fill out that we had latent capacity. We had classrooms of 5 or 6, and we're fearful of them getting even smaller, but yet we had teachers. So we've just been working to kind of build out that weight and capacity. I think if it comes to a point where we think we should grow even further and move beyond kind of our existing resources and capacity, in my mind, that's when we should potentially consider, right, a shift around the tuition costs. But failing that, you know, again, I think from the principle of as a public school wanting to make it as accessible as we think as possible, to think about some of those other populations we might want to train, recruit. You know, that's just, those are some of the things we're talking about as we're trying to set those rates.
Building on that, how do people in Cumberland know, in Yarmouth know that there is
Yeah.
this opportunity?
I mean, again, because we don't have many seats, we only have like 2 or 3 seats available this year, so we've been hesitant. So I made some outreach to, so I've tried to initiate some relationships with Yarmouth preschools, a couple of the, you know, kind of common preschools that families have there, to start to put it on their radar. We haven't initiated a bigger kind of recruitment effort, just because we feared it would create a whole line of work for us to just be telling a lot of people no. So we're trying to balance how much recruitment to do, in both, you know, everything has kind of 2 sides. We're excited. We use this moment to share, we believe, some of you may have seen, we had a Maine Public Radio reporter crew tagging along with us just a couple weeks ago, coming out to the island, and they're doing kind of a 2-part feature on island schools. And we're one of the features of how island schools are managing enrollment issues, and kind of a feature of kind of the success story of it.
Let us know when that's gonna air.
I will, yes, I'll put it out, I'll get Bev to post it and everything. So yeah, they were out here, they filmed some of our, you know, students coming out, and I talked with mainland families, talked with the lead teacher. And then they're doing a feature, the other island is the Cranberry Islands that they're doing. So they're headed up there to do their filming, and I think in early June is when it's supposed to air. So yeah, we'll get the word out, but I'm a little bit fearful that you know, might floodgates a little bit, so we'll see what happens.
I think it's after 6:30, so we probably should move on to the next topic, but we'll have questions again at the end. If anybody, you know, has any questions. So I think next up is really it's the select board, and we're focusing on the entire town budget, including the municipal side of the budget, just to give you the full picture. And we'll go through that probably fairly quickly. A lot of what we have to show is, you know, contained in the mailing that we sent out. And I will say at the end of fine bidding will give a presentation.
We don't know nothing else.
You guys can come up. Would be a bad idea.
Better. I mean,
No.
sitting right here. Oh.
And I only have a couple slides, and frankly, this presentation's fairly short to leave some time for questions. So as we outlined in the mailing, the municipal budget is about $4.6 million. The total budget for the town and the school combined, and the other ancillary, you know, things like capital savings, debt service. And this is just I don't know if I'm in the way of people's view, but just to kind of give it to you graphically, the municipal budget's about 34%. The school budget's about 27%. Debt services is approximately 10% of our total budget. Our capital contributions to our capital reserve accounts in the fiscal year 27 budget are about 18%. And so that's money that we put away for capital projects. The contributions to the local nonprofits equal about 4%. And the county tax is not insignificant at 6%. And then we have 1% of our budget is actually, as part of the secession agreement, we have a 50-year agreement with the town of Cumberland to contribute half of the value of the property taxes for the outer islands, which unfortunately includes Hope Island, to the town of Cumberland. So that right now, that's about $57,000 per year. I think when we first seceded, it was about 34 or 5, it was something like that. So it's grown substantially since we've been a town, and we're almost up to year 20 of 50. We get a ways to go. And in terms of the municipal budget, just to give you, it is in the detailed budget, but just to give you a little bit of context. The administrative budget is about $377,000. That's going up about 4%. The solid waste budget is the next biggest budget for the town, and that is $246,000 and change. And that's increasing by 6% for fiscal year 27. And that's a big concern of ours, that we spend so much money on our waste. Public Works is $221,000. And we did sort of move our department, created sort of a separate marine infrastructure department. So the change in that value, the percentages aren't really reflective of changes in the actual Public Works budget, because we moved a portion out. So I don't even remember what we used for the percentages. And then Fire and Rescue's budget is about $182,000, and their budget increased the most of any of the municipal departments by 10%. So so the total municipal budget is it's about 1.6 million. The school budget is about 1.2 million. Then debt service, which is money that the money that we've borrowed and the bonds that we have to pay off on an annual basis. And we have a schedule. Some are being paid off. I don't know if the finance committee will address it, but they have varying schedules for 20 to 20-year bonds. Then capital contributions are the funds that we choose to put in the bank to hold on to for capital projects that are upcoming, and we have several. And so that's about 800,000 for fiscal year 27, and that's a little bit higher than what we've done in the past. As I said, the nonprofit contribution is about 187,000, county tax 258, and outer islands is about 57. Then in terms of revenues, and I just want to emphasize, these are kind of estimated numbers because we never exactly know what our revenues are going to be. But on the municipal side, we estimate about $318,000 in revenue. And a good portion of that, probably almost half, is excise tax, right? It's a pretty big chunk.
Excise tax is about $140,000.
Right, so that's a big number. So keep buying those, expensive cars. And the school's revenue that Aaron just talked about is about 176. And then if the Axiom payment shows up here as a revenue. So this is money that Axiom pays to the town because the town took out the bond for the broadband. So technically it's sort of a wash because then we pay the bond. So really is not technically, in my mind, revenue. It's just sort of a net zero payment. We might even get a little bit of money. Actually, we might be on the plus side slightly, but it basically covers the bond payment for the broadband. But since that bond payment shows up in the debt service, we show it on both sides. And so that's basically what the money is that's coming in. Then, as Aaron talked about, both the school and the municipal side have undesignated fund accounts. And this is the big change for fiscal year 27 on the municipal side. So the school districts actually bumped up their undesignated fund allocation from 20 last year to 35,000 this year. We, on the other hand, on the municipal side, have decreased that significantly. And we historically have been allocating, several $100,000 from our undesignated fund towards the bottom line in the budget. And we have, this upcoming year, we're not putting any money in, partly because we are just about at the percentage where we should be. But also, we've changed our policy of how we're going to handle the undesignated fund. And is the finance committee gonna address that one? Yeah, okay, so we'll.
We have a movie.
Yeah.
So don't do.
Yeah, so you wanna, so the big difference there is there's a net decrease in, and you can think of this as sort of on the revenue side of 141,000 on the undesignated fund contribution. I will say we just recently designated for fiscal year 26, we just allocated $55,000 towards the purchase of a new backhoe. So there has been in this current tax year, use of undesignated funds. So basically, if you take the total cost of the budget and you subtract both the town and the school revenues and then the undesignated fund amount, that's the number you end up with, which is 3.972 ballpark. That's the amount of money we have to raise through taxes to balance the budget. Unlike the federal government, we actually balance the budget. And so.
Right.
And this was in your, in the mailing that we sent out, but we just wanted to sort of get an estimate of what the, difference is from fiscal year 26 to 27. And the dollar increase is about 258,000, 141 of that is sort of the differential from the undesignated fund. And that gives us about a percentage tax increase of about just under 7%. Again, that's estimated because the tax rate actually gets set after town meeting. The town assessor sets the tax rate, and it will depend a little bit on what the property valuations are at that time. Generally, our property valuations have been increasing over time. So there's also that side of the equation and how much they increase versus how much additional money we need to raise kind of sets the ultimate tax rate. But we've been, had our property values been static, we would have seen a bigger tax increase. It's partly that our valuations are also increasing. And so what this is, the upper part here is just how we calculate the tax impact, and it's basically a mill rate that we have. So we're seeing about a 0.8, just under a mill increase, which is in 1 mill is $1 of tax per $1,000 of assessed property value. And we have been, we are in the process of preparing for a revaluation. And part of the reason that was really a strong recommendation from the finance committee so that we can sort of have equitable distribution of taxes. So what the reval does, it doesn't increase everybody's taxes. It basically just brings everybody up on the same platform and revalues their properties based on sort of the current conditions. But overall, it does not result in raising more taxes. It's just redistributing among the properties on the island. So we haven't done a reval since what, 2014, 16. So we're good. But what this increase in the, estimated increase in the tax rate, just to give you a context, for a $400,000 home, that would be $332 increase in your taxes. And for a $500,000 home, it's about $415. And we used to use a $200,000 home, but we don't use that number anymore. So that's just to give you sort of an idea. And that's really all I have in terms of slides. And then I think we're happy to answer the specific questions about the budget. I would, I think it's all in the mailing, and so I don't really want to, revisit things. I would say the big picture is we have a lot of capital projects. We've been working closely with the finance committee to plan for those. We've had some successes, getting some funding. We got $1 million through Shelley Finger's office for an earmark, which was very beneficial. And we have a bunch of grant applications in the pipeline, and hopefully some of those will pan out. But I think the select board and the finance committee have been very focused on the capital planning part of our financial management. But we've also had some help from private individual who's a CPA who works with municipalities, Mark Bory, and he's a crackerjack, I think, and he's really helped us kind of streamline our finances, but, develop some better ways of tracking our funding, and it's great to get all these grants and FEMA money. We got over $1 million in FEMA money, but then we have to do all the reporting, and it's not a small thing. Could be a full-time job. So he's helping us set up systems to do that. So in the long run, I think Mark will help us manage our finances in a little better way in real time, and that will be beneficial to everybody. And I did want to highlight one thing, that the fire department has concerns about staffing, and this is universal in Maine, and I think probably across the country, that, volunteer, the availability of volunteers is decreasing, and so Eliza's on EMS, and I will say EMS folks have taken on a pretty heavy burden for this summer in terms of coverage. And of course, we tend to have more needs in the summertime as more people are on the island. We're expecting that we are going to need some per diem support, particularly on EMS. And so it's not a huge cost impact right now, but it's going to be something we're going to see going forward. And so, first of all, I think it's important we don't overburden the EMS. I think the commitment they've made is pretty major for this to get us through the summer, but it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. And I think public safety and is, of course, EMS is pretty important. And we've been working on and off of Long Island on a number of initiatives, but now we thought, well, maybe we should actually sit down together and kind of figure out what things we can collaborate on, because we share some of the same challenges. I will say Long Island School they just had their town meeting Saturday. They're down to 1 or 2 students. It's kind of a crisis over there. The school budget did pass, but it's a challenge. And when as we look down the line for Shabig, we don't have increasing student enrollment on the island, I don't think, right? I mean, the numbers are dwindling. Cliff Island has maybe 2. So it's something we all have to look at. And of course, for Shabig, since our, initiative in terms of secession was really in part to maintain the school, I think we really, it's what we spent the big bucks for. So we really have a commitment to the school here, which is good. But I think it's going to be a challenge going forward. And I think the creative thinking of the school committee is, very impressive. And so, but that is going to be something that we have to face as we move forward. And then we have a number of the details about all the various capital projects we had in the newsletter. But if you have any questions, we can answer them. So that's about all I have for the moment. And we'll answer any questions you might have, and probably stop, for a few minutes, and then we'll give the finance committee their turn. Jack.
Yeah, obviously the transfer station always comes out as a big expense. Has there been increased revenue in the last year or so, to the point where it comes anywhere near noticeable difference, I guess?
Yeah, we've been working, well, why should we answer that question?
Yeah, the increase in the last year has been substantial in terms of, what we're collecting and making people really be accountable for paying. The one thing that the select board is actively trying to work on spring into summer is to figure out a way and research more thoroughly how to offset the cost of the brush dump, which is a substantial increase. For the most part, construction and debris and things that we barge off do get charged. So when you bring your mattress or whatever, you're paying for that, so the rest of the taxes aren't being covered by it. But the brush dump is something that more or less is about nearly a $50,000 increase when you add previous year's employees. And we used to have 2 employees who would spend a whole week helping, so it's a substantial increase. And one thing that the board is looking at is figuring out a way how to charge commercial dumping in that facility and offset those costs. So that's something that will be revisited again in terms of that, as well as kind of revisiting. I think one of the things that the board, and they could speak for it, is trying to do is be more in line with looking at fees and structures more on an annual basis versus when they come up as a conversation, to really keep in line with what it's costing the town to dump is what the town is charging the individual, and then how those costs could be better distributed. So more money could be brought in to offset the costs, but in reality of it, I think, it's not gonna be one of those departments where you'll ever be able to collect enough revenue to fully pay for itself. But definitely has improved. I think this year, I wanna say, last time I looked, we were, over $50,000 in revenue that I think we've already collected, which is almost double compared to the previous year, so it's been substantial.
So Eliza's we have sort of liaisons to all the departments on the select board, and Eliza is the individual who works with solid waste. And so did you have anything you wanted to add?
I do, and I'm really pleased with so much of the progress that's happened at the transfer station. So some of the maintenance of the equipment has been done, which needed to be caught up on, and that's been a really effective part. I'm just gonna give a really good example of the fact that when it comes to things that we're disposing of, hold on, I have to look at my notes. Because the hazardous waste goes into so many different directions. The paint goes here and the light bulbs go here and the refrigerants are emptied and that goes to another place up in Lewiston. And then the actual refrigerant, appliances go to a whole other source. So when you bring something to the dump, to the transfer station to be disposed of, it really makes a difference economically to be able to send it to those streams of getting rid of the stuff. The cost of items that our citizens are being paying to dispose of really is comparable to what's being paid on the mainland, even though people, we understand there's grousing about that, but also to look at the fact that it doesn't still capture the full cost of those items. I really want to give a shout out. We have a lot of data on wood products that are being brought into the brush dump. And that's through commercial operations and private citizens bringing wood in. So we have a good idea of what's being brought in and what percentage of it is with commercial, looking at passing on that cost of commercial people having trees and brush taken down commercially and brought there, recapturing that. That's a big issue for us because the cost of clearing a lot or the cost of all of our trees that are aging out is really substantial. And we are the only island in Casco Bay that has a brush dump. The other islands, Long Island, the Diamonds, all of that has to be transported off the island, and we don't have that. But also a shout out to the climate action team, looking at some longer term solutions. Those are big questions that have been addressed, but I think that those offer some solutions. And also we have I just love the whole wildfire mitigation guy. I'm just telling you because, and we are working cooperatively with that on Long Island. Thank you to a grant that was written. And so that's been a concern that's being addressed as well. I don't know.
And I think we can't let it go without saying that Jeff Westcott, who manages the transfer station, has really been a key to quantifying kind of what's coming and going and really trying to have, a quantitative basis, technical reason for having, changing the fees. And so it's really, he isn't just up there listening to the radio, he's counting the number of boxes that are coming in, he's, measuring volumes of trees, and he's really working pretty hard to help us improve the management of the whole facility. And I think we also, since COVID, this is sort of anecdotally, I think we've had a huge increase in packaging and waste. And so we're all bearing the cost, and we're not the only community, and the state has a pretty aggressive program to, you know, they passed legislation technically to put the cost for the disposal of that packaging back on the, you know, on the Amazon and company, but how that's actually gonna happen is a question. But I think we all should think about trying to minimize our waste. And I remember when there was a period of time when the school had an initiative on trying to minimize their waste generation, and they were down to just a tiny little bag. They used, you know, cloth napkins, and they had a little bag of waste at the end of the week that made my house look like a bunch of, you know. Anyway, I think we all could help a little bit there by just trying to help minimize the waste that we have on the island. I throw all my packaging away on the mainland. That's how I handle it.
And I would encourage people to speak with Jeff with specifics. He's incredibly well informed about decisions that are made there. Yes, Steve.
I noticed the solar capital account's gonna be empty. And I was curious, why is that and where is the money gonna go to?
So I think the decision was.
Well, it's on a warrant article, it hasn't been voted on.
Right, so the decision was made, how did it go? First, the climate action team was evaluating the solar, then they said, you know, this is really a financial decision, so ultimately it got kicked to the finance committee. The recommendation that came back from the finance committee after a fair amount of work was to not purchase the solar array, which was an optional thing. And, then the recommendation from the finance committee was to take those funds, and I believe we're suggesting moving them into the facilities capital account. So they're not being spent, they're just being allocated, moved into another account that's frankly a more general account. So that's the plan right now, and I think the finance committee we may be consolidating some accounts, so it may sort of become kind of a moot point down the line anyway. But I think the bottom line was the decision was made not to purchase the array right now.
Not to purchase until the end of the lease.
Which is
Always
year 20.
Yeah.
And we're in year 8 or 9.
Yeah.
It's totally optional, I don't even have a position, I was just wondering what the decision.
Yeah, so it's not being spent. It's a good question. It's not being spent. And now that you've asked the question, I'm thinking, yeah, we should have an explanation at town meeting so we can, in case someone's wondering. Yeah. Any other questions on the sort of overall budget or anything else related? Yep, Jeff?
Yeah, sorry, here, but, so just curious on the capital side of things, how you prioritize, which items that you're gonna fund on a given year. Like, so there was a survey back in the fall, went out to all the islanders and, the public safety and town office building came in dead last in the ranking of priorities by the town, but it's funded pretty healthily in this budget. How do you decide that versus, you know, not funding it or putting it somewhere else?
Well, I won't steal the finance committee's thunder, but I would say that we do try to prioritize and at least relative to that allocation, I think it's 140 something, 165,000 maybe that we're putting into, where is it? It's in here.
Into the fire department.
So 135,000 is going into the fire department capital reserve. 50,000 of that is slated for the public safety building, and what that money is for is actually to do more work on both design and site work. So it's really, I'd say, we don't know exactly what that project's gonna look like, so it's to get further down the track to sort of have a sense of what the cost is gonna be. And then in terms of prioritization, I'd say it's been pretty vague how we've prioritized things, just sort of the big projects tended to get the money and which ones were coming down the line. And that's exactly what we are trying to develop now, working with the finance committee, is a systematic way to prioritize things, both at the departmental level. So they come forward with a bunch of projects. Well, which one is the most important and why? And then at the town-wide level, which ones are most important and why. And one of the things that we're looking at is, at least in the near future, two really big The Stone Pier is a $9 million project, ballpark, South Shore Drive is a 1.2 or 3, but fortunately for us, for South Shore Drive, we did get about almost $880,000 from FEMA, so that's gonna help. But, as we, trying to, the other part of the big capital projects is trying to get money from other sources, and so we've worked pretty hard to try to get some of those funds to help minimize the impact on the taxpayer. But in terms of prioritizing, it's really the timing of when those projects start, the magnitude of them, and then I'll let the finance committee kind of take it from there. So,
But may I just make a correction on that survey that was talking about building, and that building was not reflective of the priority of the department. And we do have a facilities committee meeting to look at, because we have 5 vehicles in 3 bays in the fire station and 1 vehicle outside in a tarp shed, looking at the needs for more bays, which can't be added onto the present building, but need to be a separate structure. So the point that I'm making is that priorities change with education about what the town needs.
So
And
this
Eric-
says 50,000 is slated for the new public safety building project.
Right.
In the mailer, but isn't that what came in last on the survey? It was what priorities, or am I misunderstanding?
It was the priorities of the perception of the community, which I think when we do some education with the community around what the needs are for our fire and rescue structures, that will change.
Earhart, did you have anything you want?
I was just gonna add that, and because you had mentioned sort of your staffing levels and the need for per diems, although there's a changing world out there with volunteer fire departments, that's also something that we're having to deal with as a town and accommodate, which speaks to the building issue as well, and how we can best do that, how we best spend those funds. And in light of all the other projects that I'm trying to, as Carol said, trying to figure out the best way to sort of, keep our, try not to impact the town too much financially in a given year in light of all these projects that we have to plan for and set aside money for.
I think, Jeff, it's a good question. I think that things have changed since that came, that question was done. I personally use bodily harm as my high priority, and so that is early in meetings that we had with Ralph. He started telling us about how they have per diem and how the world is turning toward per diem, the lack of volunteerism, the time it takes to get EMTs up to schedule because of the length of school, and that an ambulance can't leave unless they've got an EMT there. So that could be either they would have to say, you'll have to wait and have that heart attack later, or hang on, we're getting somebody from Yarmouth, or a light flight is coming in. So that was kind of a main thing to get it up there. The other thing that has happened, we heard about some communities that lost funding. Apparently, there's a lot of funding for this type of facility, and there are different levels of this facility being looked at to satisfy the various requirements. But you have to have community support. So they've had people, for instance, there's a communities that get awarded a grant, and they say, you have to put some skin in the game and say, we're really serious about this. And that will help to bring money. That was one of the reasons a year ago, they did a lot of funding for the Stone Wharf, because that encourages lenders or grantors to give you money because you're serious about it.
And I think that there is a plan to sort of have a public
Yeah.
meeting, informational meeting about the project, because I think it's evolved quite a bit since that survey. And
Yeah.
so I think that's in the game plan too. So I think, we'll be revisiting that. Yeah. Any more questions? Because I'd like to give the finance committee a chance to jump up there and speak. And then if there's more questions at the end, general questions, we can take them. Also. So we don't need this, Chip, you're gonna go on Zoom, is that what you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
You are.
Let's go.
Sorry.
Let's go. Yeah. Vicky, am I supposed to share my screen? No.
Now, did you let people know who's on the finance committee?
Yeah, so as we're getting organized here, the finance committee is John Wren, Chip Emery, Ben Kukula, Jay Corson, and Jim Hartling. Jim Hartling's a summer resident and he connects routinely by Zoom with us. He's probably on the Zoom here tonight. Ready? Yep. So basically, we're gonna talk about the capital parts of the budget that Carol just had up there. 18% for capital reserve funding and 10% for debt service. And that's the piece of the pie that the finance committee has been working on. We're also going to talk about our real estate tax versus inflation and versus Yarmouth and Cumberland. We're going to talk about the undesignated fund process a little bit, but we're primarily going to focus on the 805,000 of municipal additions to the reserve accounts. And part of that's the 50,000 that Jeff was asking about.
One of the things that, a quick look at what we had over the 27 hours of publicly recorded meetings. So I sat down and went, so I decided I would just go through 27 hours of meetings, write down some hot topics and then assign values to them. Just kidding. So, but we have a good friend that did that. Went through the 27 and grouped them by color. And the frequency with which they were discussed was, so you can tell what the important ones were discussed by the size of it and of the variety. So that's our last year and a half. Here we go.
Hey, Jeff, whatever you shared on the screen is not what's showing here.
Oh.
So, which I'm okay with, but on Zoom, there we go. Yeah, we're good now.
This is a delay or something.
Thank
It's
you.
this bar.
Yeah, that, we had that the other day, just hold it down.
Okay, so this is a look at our debt. And the debt's fairly flat.
This is like really well rehearsed. We went through this afternoon and I just have to do it properly. I don't want anyone to be disappointed. This is, and this is the same type of thing that was done with the bonds that you'll see next. This is the different bonding that we talked about by the size of the project. And then this slide will show you. Now, these are based on 112 bond projection numbers. The numbers haven't been bid yet. GEI has done a great trying to forecast them.
Okay, so if you look at 26 and 27, you see that the Cumberland debt is gonna go away after fiscal year 27. All right, and that's good, that's coming back. If we did all these projects that have been on the list, by 2031, we would have debt service of $916,000. Okay, and the finance committee thinks that's doable. We think the town can afford $10 million in new debt. Okay, but as the debt service goes up, the dollars that are available to put in the capital reserve come down. Okay, so the total of the two this year are $1,263,000, and we're going to inflate that every year for 5 years. So 5 years out, we're going to have whatever the number is, 1,400,000 in total debt and capital, but 900 of that will be in debt service and 500 will be going into the reserve accounts. So that's our starting premise.
It's kind of a look forward. There was good news and there was some perception that the bond debt is expiring from Cumberland. And gee, that's great. And that will pay for a lot. And it is good news. You see those things disappear. But with the rest of the things that are being looked at.
So another important point here is we don't have bids on anything yet. So Carol talked about the Stone Pier being a $9 million project. Well, you're reading the paper every day that somebody was planning to build a school for 100 million and the bid came in at 140 million, whatever. So we can't commit to many projects past the Stone Pier and South Shore Drive until we get some bids, although we can work on the development of those projects. This is a comparison of annual tax increases here on Shebig versus inflation. Okay, and that's just the simple math. You actually have to go back and compound it. You know, you need to say, if I was paying $1,000 in tax in 2017, and then with inflation, what would I be paying today? Versus with the tax increases we've seen in the town. And so I did those numbers. And our taxes are about 7% less than they would have been if they'd gone up at the rate of inflation. And we live on an island, and well, as we all know, things aren't cheap here. So versus inflation, we've been doing pretty well.
It is a good point. People ask a lot about the taxes. And one way you can compare it to other communities, but another way you can't, because we have 4 access points that we have to be concerned with. Three Wharfs and Cousins Wharf and Bennett's Cove. Everything has to come here back and forth. It's also a small tax base, so that compared to bigger people, if they buy a fire truck in maybe say Yarmouth, it's not the same for taxpayers as it is for our kind of small tax base. But the third one is climate and ocean, chewing away up the island. And you look at places like South Shore Drive and other places on the island. If you add those all up together, roughly, close to $2 million of damage.
So I also looked at our taxes versus Cumberland and Yarmouth. And in 2026, a $500,000 house on Shebig, the taxes would have been, if the assessment was 500,000, taxes would have been $4,700. In Cumberland, they would have been almost 7,200, and in Yarmouth, the same, 7,200. And it's interesting that the estimate that Shebig's valuation is estimated to be 82% of market. So our millage was $11 per thousand. Cumberland's millage is $25 versus that 11. But their assessment, they believe their assessment is 54% of market value.
Wow.
And then Yarmouth just did a reassess. Oh, they did a reassessment. And so they're close to 100% now. So their millage dropped substantially. So when you hear people talk about millage, you have to understand where's the assessment versus the market value. But we think our taxes are high. I'm glad we don't live in Cumberland or Yarmouth.
We haven't seen that slide yet. Do you have that slide?
No.
Okay.
No, Herb said we can only have six slots. And we have 7, but I'm gonna beg forgiveness.
Okay, so in the warrants, there's always a chart that shows the additions to reserve accounts. Okay, and these are the recommended reserve accounts this year. And this is where the finance committee and the departments and the committees did a lot of work. We went through the committees went through asset lists and said, okay, when do I need to replace the tank truck? When do I need to replace the ambulance? When do I need to replace a certain truck at Public Works? Okay, and that's all been put into a database, and how much we need to save per year to replace that equipment at the target end dates is in a lot of these numbers. So the fire department, we need to put in away $76,000 a year to replace the last 2 fire trucks that are gonna be replaced. We need one now, the tank truck, and then we need a second one, but we don't have enough time to save for those. So we will bond those when it's time to purchase those 2. But there's one we'll need in 2038 and one in 2043. So we need to put 76,000 away for all those remaining years to save for those fire trucks. So that's basically what's in the fire department reserve, plus 50,000 to continue work on developing a new public safety building concept. And in that 50,000, 20 of that is really being set aside for potential future building costs. So there's 30,000 that would be used on development of the project over the next year. Rescue vehicles, that's saving for the next ambulance. The ambulance, we need to put away 35,000 a year, and a new stretcher, which is needed in the next year or 2. And hard as it may be to believe, stretchers cost $50,000 or $40,000. And we need to buy the same stretcher that Yarmouth uses because we swap them back and forth. Stone Wharf, 100,000. Carol and Vika keep applying for grants, and grants require matching. So that's one of the reasons we need to put more money away in the Stone Pier Reserve account. They do a fantastic job on grants. I think and it's a lot of work. I think we've got 2 applications in for grants that could be over $1 million. And then we have the FEMA grant that Vika did a lot of work on. Floats and gangways, 50,000. Coastal Waters created a prioritized project list, and committees are now filling out capital improvement forms and giving us plans that back up these numbers. So that's there's some floats in there and other things. Roads. We've done a lot of road work since we became our own town. And that road work's all been done out of reserve accounts, no bonding. The estimate is that to continue to maintain our roads and do our road, we need 80 to 90,000 a year. We haven't done major road work for a lot of years. So there's a bid for 405,000 for road work to be accomplished in 27 and 28. So the 240, if we put that away this year, will get us back to the place where hopefully in future years, we only need to put in 80 or 90 to get back on the plan. Public works equipment. It's mostly truck replacement, and it's truck replacement way out 2036, tractor replacement 2048, potentially a new furnace in 2031. And then we have a backhoe lease that's basically $50,000 a year that's in that number. Building and facilities, that's not a lot. And this is an area where on our capital planning, we need to do a better job. we've got the firehouse, the town office, the garage, the transfer station, and we don't have a good understanding of when are we gonna need to replace a roof? When are we gonna need a new heating system? How old's the septic system? So we're trying to build up some reserve in that account. And hopefully we'll get to the point where we've got a minimum reserve number that will meet our needs. I think this is second page, Chip. Recycling compactor, that speaks for itself. We've got two compactors and there's replacement plans around those. And then storm damage and restoration. Carol spoke to the fact that South Shore Drive, we've got an $880,000 FEMA grant. The whole project would be $1.3 million or something like that. So we're gonna be in a situation where we need to bond the difference. We don't need to ask for approval of that bond in fiscal year 27, but 14,000 is a half a year's bond payment, so we're beginning to put bond payment money away. I think that's it.
And just quickly about the analysis for the solar array purchase, there were two things. One, it was claimed to be, you know, kind of maintenance free, or it's supposed to be a 20-year roof, and you know what usually happens to 20-year roofs. So there had been a major amount of maintenance done on it not that long ago. That worried us. Somebody has to take care of it. That could be a little bit of a time bomb worth of money. The other thing is that when people, when they sell you life insurance, they give you a string of future payments. And that, you look good and you say, oh, well, it's 5,000, it's 10, you know, that's the money that's gonna be coming to me. It's gonna be coming to you in a number of years, and you have to discount that. So that string of future payments has to be discounted into make the decision with the number of what it's worth for today, for those future payments. And they can inflate, and you can say, well, you're getting 4,000 again. Well, you're getting 4,000 in 10 years. That means it's worth X number right now. Anyway, so that was two of the factors. Oh, here we go. You've all been waiting for this. Oh, wait a second. Look, we didn't. Hello, Lydia. Oh, come on, Lydia, this is your big moment. She's already on the stage, like,
Last
give her a minute. When I take a bow, Lydia. I asked, what's an old fashioned, let's do it with a lobster, and what's an old fashioned,
Chip gets full credit.
mini moon? Then my 6-year-old grandson, no, anyway, but it's a very confusing term, undesignated funds. It doesn't mean anything. I mean, and basically, and correct me if Lydia is oversimplifying that, but there've been choices made with undesignated fund. It's leftover money from a previous year. What do we do with it? We can take it and apply it against taxes and get the taxes down, or we can save it to give people like Vika funds to use when something like a backhoe all of a sudden dies, and you need money. So you have
You make it seem like it's me personally.
She's gonna have a license plate on the back, you know. It's, there was a decision made to move some of that into saving for future funds. And also because they're doing so much asking for grants, that you need that money in place to show sincerity. Anyway, that's Lydia. We'll keep her. Thank you for my.
So wrapping it up, there's a handout here that kind of speaks to what our mission is, what we've been focused on. We're looking at how to fund the various projects, whether it's through reserve accounts or bonding, and trying to figure out how that all fits together. We've talked about the Stone Pier, South Shore Drive, public safety building. The facilities committee is doing a lot of work on public safety building. When the survey was done, I think the word in the community was it was maybe a $6 million project.
Fire department, town hall and public safety.
Yeah, it was a much bigger project than it is now. There was a presentation within the last month by the facilities committee on a public safety building. It was 2.8. They continue to work on it. There'll be a workshop sometime in the next few months to discuss that. And the finance committee is working with the facilities committee to, figure out when we can do it.
Yeah, and
What-
also
one
a
of
public communication program for this summer.
Yeah, they put a lot of time into putting that together to present it. One of the things we've tried to do, and you see in the upper right, fiscal guardrails. 1.26 million in annual capital budget, not, to exceed that, and also new debt cap 10 million. The disclaimer under it is, that's the maximum to be refined. That changes. It's changed since we started the budget process. There's been 4 or 5 large ticket impactful items that change stuff, like a backhoe. And we've used some modeling to do that and tell, the model to future bond payments and so forth, and let me know if it turns red, if it exceeds a 5% tax increase. And you can actually move things out and watch the red go away. So there are ways to manage expenditures and as best we can. So we've also taken a look at that.
Okay, just to wrap it up, Ben's done a lot of work on tax relief. And I'd say right now he's developed some educational materials. They're available on the town website. When the tax bills go out this year, I think we're going to include a flyer so everybody knows that if you're not applying for the homestead exemption, you ought to. If you don't have your veterans exemption, you ought to. And then there's some other state programs that are less known that we'll educate people on. And then at some point in time, we're going to get community input on how the community feels about local tax relief for low to moderate income residents. From a planning standpoint, we're trying to build a process that when we go away continues. It's got some structure. The accountant consultant that Carol mentioned, Mark Roy, he has a capital planning process that we're going to take a look at and potentially integrate into next year's cycle. But before we do that, we're glad that we're kind of done for fiscal year 27, except we've got to get through the town meeting, right? But in June, our June meeting, we're going to say, how did the process work? What was good, what was bad about it? And we are going to make some changes. How do we prioritize projects? And how do we get everybody more quickly on the same prioritization of what those projects are? We had capital request forms, but we need to educate everybody as to how to use them better. we're gonna try to go out 10 years. For forecasts from the departments and the committees. I think that's all we have.
Well, and I guess I wanna add that the select board is very grateful to all, for all the work that the
Yeah.
finance committee has done. Because it's really helping us, head in a direction that feels a little more solid than we did in the past, and we have. I would say, I don't know how it compares, it feels like an inordinate amount of capital needs, we take care of. Stone Wharf, and we also have responsibility for the Cousins Wharf. We have road damage, we don't have any state roads over here, so we don't get any, state doesn't fix them, and so. For a small community our size with our tax base, it's a lot of capital needs, and. I think the finance committee is really helping to chart a path for the future. And I think the underlying theme there is, we are probably gonna feel some tax increases. The goal is not to make them, to keep them from being kind of very abrupt and substantial, and try to smooth them out over time.
Questions? Steve?
On the debt cap. That's assuming, I don't know what your interest rate assumptions are, when you come up with that $10 million number, but if we get into an inflationary environment. And particularly if that's steep, then the debt cap is gonna have to change, right, it'll have to come down.
Yeah, that's what it said there, yeah, subject to change.
Am I saying that right?
Come down.
Just say it again, I'm not sure I understood what your point was.
Oh, what I'm asking is that the $10 million debt cap that you're using.
Yeah, target guardrails, yeah.
That's based on a certain assumption about interest rate.
Yes, that's based on a 4.5% 25-year bond rate. Yes,
Right, and thank you, and if that rate changes due to inflation, then the debt cap assumption will also
correct.
change.
Yes,
Sure, of course.
yep. We won't be able to afford to buy a new house.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Job.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah.